You could smell it before you opened the door. Canvas, leather, mothballs, machine oil, something metallic underneath it all, like a room full of history sweating through its clothes. You pulled the door open and a bell rang, or it didn't, and it didn't matter, because the second you stepped inside, you forgot about the street behind you. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. The ceiling was low, the lights were dim, there were no displays, no mannequins, no sale signs, just stuff piled on shelves, hanging from hooks, stacked in wooden bins, folded on tables, shoved into corners, canvas duffel bags, wool blankets stamped US in faded black letters, leather flight jackets with zippers that weighed more than your school bag, steel helmets, some with dents, some with scratches, some with a name written inside in pencil that nobody would ever explain, canteens that still smelled like metal and water, and wherever they had been before they ended up in this store in your town. This was the Army and Navy surplus store, and for a boy with $2 in his pocket and nowhere to be until dinner, it was the greatest place on earth. You didn't go there because you needed something. You went because you might find something. That was the difference between a surplus store and every other store your mother dragged you into. At Sears, you knew what was on every shelf. At the surplus store, you had no idea. You could find a World War II periscope and spend 20 minutes looking around corners with it. You could find a compass that opened and closed with a click so satisfying you did it 40 times before putting it back. You could find a gas mask, a bayonet sheath, a set of dog tags with no name, a folding shovel, a mess kit with a fork that bent in the middle, a pair of binoculars heavy enough to anchor a boat. Everything was real. That was the thing. Nothing was made to look military. It was military. The jacket on the rack had been issued to someone who wore it somewhere that mattered. The helmet had been on a head. The boots had been on feet that walked through places you'd only read about in your history textbook. You were 10 years old and you were holding something that had been to war. You didn't understand that fully, but you felt it. You felt it in the weight because everything was heavy. The canvas was heavy. The leather was heavy. The steel was heavy. Even the buttons were heavy. Nothing in that store was made of plastic. Nothing was made in China. Nothing was designed to look good on a shelf or sell to a tourist. It was made to survive a war. And if it could survive a war, it could survive whatever you were going to put it through on a Saturday afternoon in your backyard. You bought things you didn't need. A canteen for a camping trip you hadn't planned. A compass for a hike you'd never take. An ammunition box, empty, brass-cornered, olive drab, that you carried home and used to store your baseball cards or your fishing lures or whatever else a boy collected that deserved a box that felt like it had been somewhere important. You wore the field jacket to school, you wore the dog tags under your shirt. You carried the folding knife in your pocket and never used it for anything sharper than an apple, but you had it, and having it made you feel ready. Ready for what, you didn't know, but the surplus store made you feel like whatever was coming, you could handle it. Some of you were scouts. Your scoutmaster told you to get a canteen, a mess kit, and a poncho for the campout, and your mother could have gone to Sears and bought you something clean and new with a price tag that matched. But your dad said no. He drove you to the surplus store instead because he knew that the canteen at Sears was tin-plated aluminum that would dent if you looked at it sideways, and the one at the surplus store was stainless steel that had already survived more than a campout and would outlast both of you. You brought that gear to the campout, and the kid next to you had his from Sears, brand new, matching set, still in the packaging, and his canteen leaked by the second day, and yours didn't. And you didn't say anything, you didn't have to. Some of you took the surplus gear into the woods behind your house and played things you wouldn't play today. You divided into squads, you wore the helmets, you carried the canteens, you crawled through ditches with the folding shovel strapped to your belt because that's what soldiers did, and you were a soldier for the afternoon. You came home filthy, scraped, bruised, with mud inside your boots and leaves in your helmet, and your mother looked at you like you'd been to a place she didn't recognize. You had been. That place was called Being a Boy, and the surplus store was the outfitter. Some of you went with your dad. He knew the store better than you did because he had been going longer. He went straight to the back where the heavy stuff lived, the field jackets, the parkas, the rain gear, and he talked to the man behind the counter the way men talk when they have known each other for years without ever learning each other's last name. The man behind the counter had served. You could tell because of the way he handled the merchandise, not like a shopkeeper, but like a man who knew what every piece was for and where it had been. He could tell you which regiment a helmet belonged to by looking at the markings. He could tell you whether a jacket was Korea or Vietnam by the cut of the collar. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened. Your dad bought a wool sweater or a pair of boots or a poncho liner that he would use for the next 30 years without it ever wearing out. And you walked out carrying a gas mask bag you had turned into a book satchel and a canteen you would fill at every water fountain for the rest of the summer. It all started because America had too much of everything. When the Second World War ended, the country had produced more equipment than any nation in history. Millions of uniforms, hundreds of thousands of vehicles, enough mess kits, and canteens, and flashlights and shovels to outfit an army that no longer existed. The government created the War Assets Administration and told them to sell it, all of it. $34 billion worth of surplus, more than $360 billion in today's money. At one auction, a B-29 Super Fortress bomber sold for $350. One man, one private citizen, bought 536 Sherman tanks, and in every town in America, a man with a truck and a handshake bought a load of that surplus and opened a store. He hung a hand-painted sign, Army Navy Surplus. He stacked the shelves to the ceiling, he opened the door, and he waited. And they came. First, the veterans who wanted the gear they knew. Then the hunters who wanted the gear that worked. Then the campers, the fishermen, the scouts, the hikers, and then the boys. The boys who didn't hunt or fish or hike, but who wanted to be in that store because it smelled like something they couldn't find anywhere else. When the World War II surplus started running thin in the 60s, the Vietnam War filled the shelves again. Jungle fatigues in a green so different from the olive drab of the old stuff that you could tell the wars apart by color alone. Boonie hats with a brim that kept the rain off your neck. Poncho liners, the greatest blanket ever issued by any military in history, and every soldier and every surplus store customer who ever owned one knows exactly what that sentence means. Lightweight, warm, indestructible, and so comfortable that men who served brought them home and used them for the rest of their lives. If you bought one at the surplus store for $3, you still have it. It's on your couch right now, or folded in your truck, or draped over the back of the chair where you watch television. It still works. It will always work. M65 field jackets with the hidden hood rolled tight inside the collar that boys wore until the elbows gave out and then kept wearing because a jacket that has been through what an M65 has been through doesn't stop working just because the elbows are bare. The gear changed. The smell stayed the same. After the Cold War ended in 1991, the Pentagon shrank. Fewer troops meant fewer uniforms meant less surplus. After September 11th, the rules tightened. Demilitarization regulations required more and more equipment to be destroyed rather than sold. The pipeline that had filled those stores for 50 years started to dry up. And then the internet arrived. Suddenly, the serious collectors, the men who wanted an authentic World War II tanker jacket or a Korean War-era parka, did not need to drive to a store and dig through bins. They went on eBay, they found exactly what they wanted in exactly the size they needed, and they bid against each other from their living rooms, and the prices climbed to levels that no kid with $2 would ever reach. The treasure left the store and went into the screen. What replaced it was something else entirely. Walk into one of the stores that still has the sign outside and look at what is on the shelves. Chinese-made camouflage pants with tags that say Rothco or Proper, airsoft guns in blister packs, paintball masks, polyester tactical vests with more pockets than anyone needs, and no history in any of them. The olive drab is still there, but it is printed on fabric that weighs nothing and will last one season. The boots are there, but they are made of synthetic leather and glued soles that separate in the rain. The dog tags are there, but they are blank and sold as fashion accessories. Pick up one of those jackets, feel the weight. There is none. Put it next to the M65 field jacket your father bought in 1972 for $14 and wore for 30 years through rain, snow, work, and weekends. His jacket still hangs in the closet. It weighs 4 pounds. It smells like him and every place he ever wore it. The one on the shelf today weighs less than a t-shirt and smells like the shipping container it arrived in. The store looks the same from the outside. The sign still says Army, Navy, Surplus, but the soul walked out the back door somewhere around 2005 and never came back. What is left is a costume shop with a military theme. Friedman's in Nashville lasted 74 years before closing in 2023. Joey's in Watertown, Connecticut, started during World War II out of the back of a station wagon. 82 years later, the owner closed the doors and cited the same 2 reasons every owner cites: overhead costs and online sales. G.I. Rose in Wichita was the last surplus store in the city. When it closed, there was no one to buy it. The sign came down, the shelves were cleared, and the smell, that smell, the one that hit you before you opened the door, left that building and has nowhere else to go. Some of you are thinking about yours right now, the one on Main Street, or the one near the railroad tracks, or the one in the strip mall between the laundromat and the barber shop, the one where the bell rang when you opened the door, the one where you found the helmet with the dent and held it in your hands and wondered whose head had been inside it and what he saw and whether he made it home. That store is gone now, or if it is still there, it is not the same store. The real surplus is gone. The weight is gone. The canvas that could stop rain and wind and time is gone. What is left is nylon and polyester and plastic and a sign that promises something the shelves no longer deliver. You were 10. You walked in with $2 and no plan. You walked out with a canteen, a compass, and the feeling that the world was a place you could handle. The store did not teach you that. The store did not say a word. But every heavy, real, scarred, dented, war-tested thing in it told you the same story. Someone carried this somewhere that mattered, and now it is yours. That story is the thing the internet cannot ship. That weight is the thing Amazon cannot deliver. And that smell, canvas, leather, mothballs, oil, and 50 years of history breathing through the walls is the thing that no store with a surplus sign will ever have again. If you walk through that door, you know. Tell us in the comments, what was the first thing you ever bought at a surplus store?